I'm Norman Robinson, and welcome to Affordable Housing Matters. You know, one of the major problems in our nation is the lack of care for our veterans returning home from active service. You've probably seen some of them on the streets. Well, on today's show, we will discuss how one agency is looking to make the return home better for all of our heroes who serve. Also on today's show, we will visit an agency looking to end homelessness for our abandoned youngsters. We have a great show planned for you this evening, so don't go far.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving.
Bastion is an intentional community in which wounded, ill, or injured veterans live alongside retired military and civilian volunteers. Joining me now to discuss how this community is possible and how someone can apply to one of their programs is CEO of Bastion, Mr. Dylan Tent. How are you, Dylan?
I'm doing just great. Happy Mardi Gras, Norman.
Happy Mardi Gras. Good seeing you. This is quite an undertaking you have here.
Yeah.
What is the significance of a program like this where you say what you're doing is relying on the strength of military communities? Exactly what does that mean?
Well, I'm bringing my comrades home, quite literally, all the way home. There is a separation, a sense of loss when you leave the military, as I'm sure you understand and feel. That sense of loss is compounded in the world we live in, where now only about 1% of us have served in uniform. And when you come home, especially off a deployment like I did in 2005, the effect can be quite lonely. And it's that sense of loneliness that pervades our ranks that is fueling a suicide epidemic and another epidemic of loneliness and disconnectedness. And so what we've been able to do and accomplish right here in New Orleans is build the nation's first intentional community designed and built from the ground up to support warriors and their families come home all the way and plant themselves in a community, heal and grow together, and become a viable citizen in the community. And these are warriors who have, some of them, been affected by great trauma and injury.
No question about it. So when you got this idea, how did you go about executing it?
Well, it took me 5 years to convince enough people that this crazy idea could work.
Yeah.
But one of the first things I did was reach out to a dear friend of mine named David Miller, who's an affordable housing developer here in the city. In fact, the Falstaff belongs to him right here over my left shoulder. It's one of his first post-Katrina projects. And over time, I mean, it took a lot of work, and I learned
I can imagine.
It pays to be stubborn and hard-headedness, to hard-headed. That's what the infantry taught me very well, or reinforced anyway. And yeah, with a lot of love. From a lot of different people.
Give me your spiel. Say, I'm someone who can perhaps make a significant contribution to your program. What would you say to me to appeal to my
Yes. Oh, thank you. Great question.
Interest. Yeah.
So let me paint the picture for you first.
Okay.
Bastion is 58 apartment homes on a 5.5-acre campus. We have a very small community center where we do a lot of programming, a lot of health programming. So much, in fact, we're bursting out of the seams. And so we are on the cusp of building a 14,000 square foot commercial wellness center that will be open to the public.
Wow.
In that clinic, we're going to have a neuro rehab outpatient clinic by Sparrow, an adaptive gym by Mark Raymond Jr., Split Second Fitness, another homegrown New Orleanian. And a hot yoga studio by Magnolia, Adrian Jackson, who is currently operating on Bazin Street. This will be our second location. We're going to program lots of community space, a big food pantry. There will be a program that lives under the roof that is focused on empowerment. Now we're talking about health, but I'm learning the further I go along in this journey if we're not also focused on financial health, we're missing a big part of the equation. And so anyone who comes to this center, whether they're a client of Mark's or Adrian's or Sparrow's, they'll be able to access this program. And my goal is to mobilize 1,000 warriors and families in New Orleans, mobilize them toward whole health by 2028. I want to break ground this year. It's not too late. It's getting a little bit harder to do, but we can do it.
What kind of funding are you shooting for?
I want to source it 100% through philanthropy. I want to be able
That's
to
ambitious.
generate revenue from the Wellness Center that is feeding the program. And I want to seed an endowment at the same time, but yeah, we can do it. It can be done.
Did you specifically set out to fund this through philanthropic efforts and not seek the route like a lot of agencies do towards trying to get some federal grants, federal funding? Or is it just you don't want to have anything to do with the federal funding?
I thank you for that question. It's very important. I think the government does have a stake in this, and I'm working with Councilman Green, Eugene Green was at the site yesterday. I'm working with my friends like Jason Hughes and Matt Willard, who are state legislators. I'm hoping to meet with the governor. Governor, if you're out there, it's not too late. Let's do a capital outlay. And I'm very. I think government does play a role in this project, and so there is room for a capital outlay. I think we're also exploring with Enhanced Capital and Richard Montgomery new market tax credits. So that's another possibility. But yeah.
I'm taking it. I take it that this took a lot of research, a lot of study, because I noticed that you're covering a lot of areas, especially as it relates to the mental health and the physical health and the financial health. How did you decide that those were areas that needed to be addressed?
Good question. That goes back to the origin of Bastion. Traumatic brain injury is the signature wound from the War on Terror. And it's a product of the overuse of improvised explosive devices, roadside bombs. I had a lot of buddies coming home with this injury, Norman. When I surveyed the landscape, and keep in mind, I went to Walter Reed, I went to the Center for the Intrepid, I went to the Pentagon, I went to the VA's Polytrauma Hub in Richmond, Virginia. What everyone was describing to me was not just a gap in the continuum of care, but a cliff. We could deliver the best state-of-the-art medical care while you're in, and then once you're discharged, these folks were going back to communities that were not equipped to sustain them and keep them viable. And so I stumbled on this blueprint. At the time, I was thinking a group home, but this was a blueprint to build an entire neighborhood where we could also invite civilian volunteers to live next door and be part of the care team. And so that is the model that we have implemented. It is a model of reciprocal service and mutual aid. It is neighbors helping neighbors on a very intentional level and focused on invisible wounds like traumatic brain injury.
So how did you decide that living next to civilians was important? That was going to be an important cog in the wheel of your production?
Well, I had a hunch that it was important, and I didn't realize how important it was until we actually implemented it. But it was important for me from the very beginning to bridge that military-civilian divide. As I mentioned, only 1% of us have served in the military. The rest of the population does not have that experience, and so why wouldn't we recruit them to join in and participate and engage with us in that healing process? Now, as a veteran, we don't own the monopoly on trauma. Heck, we're living in post-Katrina New Orleans.
Sure.
There are kids growing up on the street that are dodging bullets.
Yes.
Right?
For real, yes.
And so what we're learning about trauma, and more importantly, how to heal from it and become resilient people, is something we want to share with our friends and neighbors who didn't serve, but are no less affected by the corrosive impact of trauma and loss. And so we've had wonderful civilians come and live with us as neighbors. We have a Blue Star mother who raised 2 Air Force veterans, who is one of our cooks. Her name is Sylvia McGee. She is serving up love and hot meals for our more vulnerable in the community. We have a retired mental health nurse. How impactful could that be? Yeah, you know, to have that kind of capacity living on the site. But I've learned, do not underestimate the power of hugs and cookies. And just to be there, just to be present and hold space with people who are going through a lot can really mean the difference.
In my simplistic mind, it just seems to me that you're trying to reconnect people with their humanity.
Yes. Yes. It is up to us as veterans, Norman, actually, to take what we have learned, born on the battlefield, born from trauma, and share that gift of healing and reconciliation for the benefit of humanity. Is it not? That is the hero's journey. That is the journey I'm on.
Mm-hmm. For the benefit of those who might be watching, who might have some interest in this because either they are veterans or they are relatives of veterans, or they simply want to reach out and do something to help veterans, how do they get involved in what you're trying to do?
Well, you can go to our website at joinbastion.org, send us a note or call our 800 toll-free number and talk to Sherry, whose husband is actually deploying to Germany now in response to Ukraine, and my heart goes with my friends and comrades in Ukraine. But that's the easiest way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that the trauma that our veterans are currently dealing with is different from the trauma that the veterans from Vietnam faced?
Wow.
And in what way?
That's a very important question because we do have Vietnam veterans living on our site too. We're multi-generational, you know. What I am learning and feeling and experiencing right now, and thanks to the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, this historic effect of negligence and discrimination and how that has taken a toll on especially our brothers in arms from Vietnam, on their physical health. Not just their mental health, but I mean, we talk about mental health and physical health as if they exist separately, but they are inextricably linked. One affects the other. And I think if you ask our Vietnam veterans, they are finding themselves a new sense of purpose and passing on what they have learned to a younger generation, as we were talking about earlier. And I think it's, to tie it back into reconciliation, something is happening at Bastion. You have to come and sense it and feel it and talk to our residents yourself. But there is something, we're completing a circle, I suppose. We're making it whole, we're making it right across generations.
No doubt it's a significant effort that you're undertaking here, and thank you for sharing, and we hope to have you back.
Oh, I'd love to come back. Thank you.
You're welcome. When we return, youth homelessness is on an exponential rise, and we will visit with one local organization fighting now to keep our youngsters sheltered, and we'll have more on that when we return. Don't go far.
Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like to have my seat?
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Covenant House is a 501c3 nonprofit organization working in recognition of God's providence and fidelity to care for the youth by providing shelter and helping combat the plague we know as human sex trafficking. That's really awful. makes me sad to think about that, you know. And joining me now to discuss all that Covenant House New Orleans does in our community is the Executive Director of Covenant House, Ms. Renisha Robertson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, and I want to get to the thing that really makes me sad before we actually explore, you know, what Covenant House really covers, all of its entities. This sex trafficking thing, it just seems to be pervasive, not only in New Orleans but all over the country, if not the world. How do you come to grips with that?
It's very challenging. We at Covenant House have been running our program to support survivors of human trafficking. So we also address labor trafficking as well. You know, at Covenant House, we sort of specifically focus on youth and young adults up to the age of 24, but we see survivors of human trafficking of all ages, and they really see Covenant House as a refuge and as a safe space to help support them. It's very challenging, lots of trauma, you know, experiences of trauma. You know, when we think about human trafficking, quite often we sort of focus on the sex trafficking. And, you know, there's lots of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. There's a lot of coercion. We see a lot of young people, men and women, who have been coerced and lured into sex trafficking and have been victimized on all fronts. We work very closely with other organizations that are helping survivors of trafficking. We also work very closely with law enforcement because we think it's really important that we don't further victimize these individuals who themselves, they're victims. They've been lured and coerced into this, and you know, we don't want to see them suffer further trauma. So
a lot of times when these kids are out in the street and then they're arrested for, you know, sex crimes, they themselves have been victimized.
Correct. Yes.
And so they're being doubly victimized when they get arrested. Correct. And then they get a record.
Yes. And further puts them in a position where they can't find, you know, employment, further their education, and find, you know, ways to stabilize and to overcome those experiences.
So when kids are running away from home, and I know that Covenant House, that was the initial goal for Covenant House, to reach out to kids who were on the street, homeless, because they, for some reason, couldn't manage, you know, to stay at home. So when they are running away from home, then they become more susceptible to these kind of predators.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you counsel them? How do you counsel them against such dangers?
Well, you know, we work at all levels. First, I think with our outreach team, you know, we're on the street. We're communicating with schools, we're communicating with other organizations serving youth, and we're looking for young people who, you know, are experiencing some housing instability or homelessness, not just, you know, kids, quote unquote street kids or kids living on the street, but young people who are having, you know, a lot of challenges in their homes due to, you know, a number of traumas, a number of challenges, and we, you know, work with them to let them know that there is a safe place, and we can help them, we can support them. We have a very comprehensive program, as well as a residential safe space for them.
I know we kind of backed into this issue because I wanted to get the sex and human trafficking thing out of the way, but what broadly, what does Covenant House cover?
Yeah. So Covenant House New Orleans has a 33-year history here in New Orleans, and we work to provide a safe space, a sanctuary for young people ages 16 to 22 experiencing homelessness or housing instability. We offer an array of services, first with our youth emergency shelter. So young people looking for respite, young people looking for a warm bed, the basic needs, clothes, food, shelter. That gives us an opportunity to sort of assess with that young person what their challenges are, what their trauma may be, and how we can further support them. In addition to our residential services, our emergency shelter, and even further transitional housing, as well as rapid rehousing, housing first programs where we work in partnership with our local continuum of care, Unity for the Homeless, to distribute federal funding that supports housing assistance for those individuals who are homeless. We also offer comprehensive supportive services, everything from how to help support around education and employment, intensive case management services. Mental health is a critical component.
That's got to be a crucial component.
Yes. We are fortunate to have a team of social workers. We have partnerships with local mental health clinicians, and we're able to offer mental health care on site. We also have a really great and long-standing partnership with Tulane School of Medicine, and we have an on-site clinic where our young people can come, get assessed, and also access medical care.
You know, people are often curious about why youngsters, excuse me, can't get along at home, and then they finally decide that they're going to just leave home and go on the street. What percentage would you say of the kids out there are suffering from some kind of mental issue?
About a third of the young people that end up coming to Covenant House have some experience of trauma, some emotional distress. Oftentimes we think that young people are running away, they're unable to, be at home because of whatever individual challenges they may be facing. We see a lot of young people who are not able to stay home. They've been...
Really?
Yes, we see young people who, for a number of reasons, we have an LGBTQ youth who are rejected from their families, by their families, and have no place to go. And so they end up at Covenant House.
Is that becoming more of an issue?
We have a lot of young people that come to Covenant House because they have nowhere to go. They are not getting along at home with family. They may have some mental health challenge that their family may not understand and may not be able to address, and clearly don't know what to do. And so sometimes young people are then rejected and sort of cast out of those home environments because things escalate and become explosive and become further a toxic environment for the young people. And we really try to work with families, not just the young people. I was
going to ask that question. What programs exist to help reconnect parents with their children? We
really focus on family reunification. If it is a healthy situation, if we can work with families, we really try to support families and rebuild those familial bonds. We reach out to parents and caretakers often. A lot of our young people come from the foster care system, so these are young people who
what do you do about in a situation like that? That seems to me to be awfully complicated when you're... And a lot of these kids, when you talk about foster care, they've been kicked around a lot. And tossed around and passed around in a lot of homes through this foster care system. So how do you handle? I guess what I'm asking is, how do you get a child who's been abused to that extent to trust you?
That is challenging. That is challenging. I think when a young person comes to Covenant House, they're coming, some of them at a point of desperation because they have nowhere else to go. And they know Covenant House has been a pillar in this community in serving young people with these challenges for so many years. We do a lot of outreach, but also I think Covenant House has really created this message and delivered this message that we are here 24/7, doors open for young people 16 to 22, and whatever your challenges are, we are here. We're here to help you sort through those challenges. So trust is not always there immediately, but I think first being able to provide for basic needs, and then two, through the process of providing ongoing intensive trauma-informed case management services, and then to be able to offer additional mental health services, substance use treatment programs, other preventative services, helping with education and employment, really wrapping around these young people the structure and the supports and the unconditional love that they need. They begin to build that trust.
So which is the bigger issue, mental health or substance abuse, or are they tied together?
Often, of course, tied together. And not often when we say mental health, we're not only talking about diagnosed mental illness. We're talking about young people that have experienced trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, community trauma, living in communities where there's heightened violence, communities where there's, adversity and struggles, poverty. Those experiences, I think, are compounded. And these young people come to us with those experiences, and it can manifest if we don't start to recognize, the emotional challenges. It can then sort of manifest into further mental illness or mental health challenges.
What programs exist in your organization to help these kids get clean, those kids who are dealing with some kind of substance abuse issue?
We work very closely with other facilities in the area that provide inpatient substance use programs. There aren't a lot of programs for adolescents as it relates to substance use. We do have a licensed social worker on our team that focuses on substance use disorders and substance use. We sort of take a harm reduction model where we work with young people where they are and try to help them build the skills and the more positive coping mechanisms to start making healthier choices. And so we provide that along with our group therapy and individual therapy sessions.
Is there a way that a parent who's concerned about what their child happens to be doing that might be a little disturbing to them to reach out to Covenant House?
Yes, of course.
So you do have that avenue for parents?
We primarily focus on providing shelter for young people, and then wrapping around those supportive services for young people. In the process of trying to reunify families, we do engage with parents, but we want to make sure that it's healthy for those young people.
That's important, yes.
We point parents in the right direction to other resources and services that they, can take advantage of to help build, an environment where it's healthy and where those young people can then be reunified.
All right.
Yeah.
Ms. Renisha Roberts, thank you very much for being here. And the Covenant House is privileged to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've given us a lot of information, and thank God you're there, especially for those kids that are being, sexually and mentally abused.
Thank you.
So come back and visit us.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
We would again like to thank all of our guests for joining us today here on Affordable Housing Matters. We also hope that you take the time to support these and other organizations doing great work around our city. God knows they need it. And remember, if you would like to watch or rewatch any of our past programs, please visit the WLAE YouTube page. There you can view all of our programming at your leisure. Meanwhile, I'm Norman Robinson, and we will see you next time right here on Affordable Housing Matters.